Welcome back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk, and this time we have Wyatt Reed. Hello, Wyatt. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Good. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's amazing to have you on. You are one of the few, let's say, real journalists that we've, mainstream, you can even say, journalists that we've had on the show. I actually ran into you, so to say, on my way to Donetsk in the virtual world. Tell us a bit about yourself and where you're from, what took you to Donetsk, and whatever else you want to share with our audience.
Absolutely. Well, as you noted, my name is Wyatt Reed. I'm a journalist. I work and have worked now for several years as a correspondent with Sputnik News. My work has recently taken me to the Donbass, but before that, it's taken me all over Latin America. I've covered elections, uprisings, protests, coups throughout the continent. And that's really been kind of a central focus of mine for several years now. Before I worked at Sputnik, I was a freelance journalist. I did a lot of work around the US-backed coup d'etat in Bolivia as kind of my first major project.
Okay.
I was down on the ground reporting on this when a lot of the mainstream guys, basically none of them, were touching it. And yet indigenous protesters were being gunned down with machine guns from helicopters by a coup government that was backed very openly by the United States government. That experience really kind of set me on a trajectory of saying, you know what, I want to show what it's like on the other side of the gun, what it's like to be on the receiving end of the violence meted out by the United States government, by the military industrial complex. And so ultimately that work took me, as you noted very recently, to the Donbass, because that is kind of the epicenter of the war machine's efforts right now. That's kind of the focal point of this new Cold War of the U.S. ruling class versus Russia and China and kind of the rest of the world that doesn't want to accept this unipolar, hegemonic kind of understanding of global relations. I think I can all kind of trace back to my reporting in Latin America in a pretty direct way. And I feel very blessed, to be able to get to do this work, to be able to cover this stuff firsthand. Because that's, to me, that's kind of the guiding principle behind my reporting, is I want to go the places the big guys won't and show you the stuff that they refuse to.
We've got some video playing in the background of one of the reports you sent me from the Donbass when you were in Donetsk itself. There's also that incident where I believe it happened about a week or so before I got there, which was when you got there for a week and or 10 days or something like that. And basically the first night that you got there, that you went to your hotel. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, I believe I sent you that other video that you can check out. If you want to put that up, you'll be able to see basically. It's actually the other video, not quite
not
that
this
one.
one.
The one I believe right afterwards.
All right.
That's kind of the immediate aftermath.
Just had an artillery strike. Here.
You can see that.
Here in Donetsk.
Yeah.
I'm about 100 meters up from the Donbass Palace, which is really the nicest hotel in Donetsk, one of the nicest hotels in Donetsk, known to host journalists. And that is the immediate aftermath of an artillery strike that I almost walked into by Ukrainian nationalists. From what I later learned, who were using a 155 millimeter, that is to say a NATO standard round, that shot at my hotel, didn't quite hit the facade, but of course all of the shrapnel blew apart the windows, hit the main door. And as I noted at the time, if I'd been walking about 30 seconds or a minute faster, I very likely would have been killed in that strike. Impossible to say whether I was being targeted personally, but that hotel is known to host journalists. So if they weren't targeting me, they were kind of just targeting all of us, is the way that I see that now. But it was my, as you said, first experience in Donetsk. I had gotten there less than 2 hours prior to that strike. And that was, I finally, at the end of that video, I sprint inside the hotel, and I was met with the head of security. He wanted to put me away in a bomb shelter down below, and I said, no, I can't go down there. I need to record what's happening and need to be up here. And then subsequently, the rest of the staff kind of came out. Some of the other guests came out, and we all kind of ended up just drinking a little bit of whiskey and kind of calming our nerves collectively. And they told me, welcome to Donetsk, brother. Like, you survived your trial by fire. That's what we've all been dealing with for 9 years. That was kind of the attitude. But I'm very grateful to be alive, and grateful that I survived my experience with what the people in Donetsk are been going through for years and years. Unlike many of them, I was able to survive that experience.
The thing that struck me the most is how, I don't know if you noticed, after the second or third day there, you kind of learn the difference between the outgoing and the incoming sounds, and you can distinguish. That was the biggest shocker for me, that I became an expert within 2-3 days.
The rubber band sort of sound of air defense.
Yeah, that as well.
You also learn to start walking on the western side of the streets, so that incoming artillery is less likely to hit you.
The buildings,
the shrapnel.
Yeah.
Because you'll have a natural kind of barrier there to protect you, and any shrapnel coming is going to keep going that way, keep going to go to the east. So you don't want to be on the east side of the street, you want to be on the west side, protected a little bit more. I started thinking about where I'm sitting when I'm eating breakfast. I'm like, oh, I want to be in this part of the restaurant, not this part.
Yeah. And there's also the whole walking on concrete as opposed to in the grass because of the pedal mines. That was a big thing for me, like coming back to normal civilization, quote unquote, and looking out for dog poo is not the same level as looking out for pedal mines in Donetsk, but it's the same idea, basically.
It's just a different people joke about being like a landmine, oh, watch, that's a land. No, that's an actual landmine. It's so bizarre coming back from that city, because you're coming from a city where everyone has PTSD, right? Everyone is just in a state of PTSD at all times. And then you go back to kind of this normal blasé sort of existence. You go back to the United States, or you go back to Western Europe or something, and it's almost like living in a parallel reality. And you still have kind of the residual effects of, I would hear like a trash can lid shut really loud, and I'm boom, I'm like, for a split second, I'm thinking, okay, I need to take cover. But yeah, it's certainly not something that very many people really, I think, understand. It's
about
almost,
the whole situation,
right. I feel a little bit like a Vietnam vet coming back or something to the U.S., where it's just like,
You had much closer brushes with death than I did. Like, I was lucky in the sense that I didn't hear anything that close as you did. But the idea of, like, the whole war zone, and the fact that you said everyone there has PTSD, like, that's not an exaggeration. Like the dog poo joke is a joke, but it's reality, because like when I walk outside in the thing, and like that half second second, like you said, like your brain is wired to think about both dog poo and pedal mines. You know what I mean? And the people who are living there, I can only imagine. Like we did talk recently with the Serbian journalist who's there still, Miodrag Zarkovic, and he says that like for the first time in the 7 years that he's been going there, he sees people who are just chilling on the corners of buildings, you know, which must be a new experience for them because it hasn't been safe enough to do that in many years. You know what I mean?
And it's an experience that you have to think there's a whole generation of children that grew up without that ability, that really didn't have the ability to go out and socialize with their friends. They grew up in basements. Like Poroshenko, you know, years ago infamously threatened that, you know, our kids will be going to school, our kids will go to kindergarten, their kids will be stuck in basements. That's what happened. That's what happened here. And it really is, it's hard to put like a specific quantity on that kind of psychological damage. You know, it's hard to quantify
it's generational.
that.
Yeah.
But it is. It's like a lost generation. You know, we think of like the damage that might have been done from several years of like remote learning for kids that have now, you know, they're several years behind on where they should be. Imagine for like a decade, you just, you know what I mean? Everyone has to do this remote learning stuff. You don't get a chance to socialize with anybody.
Well, I have to compliment you on your ability to catch the humor in the world we live in, because of the YouTube algorithm and whatnot, I've decided to market this as the worst comedy show on YouTube. And discuss basically geopolitics and everything else. But yeah, the point is, yeah, it's comedically sad how, you know, what the world has turned into and how ridiculous everything's gotten. You mentioned Donbass before and Poroshenko. One of the questions that I had lined up for you is how long have you been following the Donbass issues? Like, had you heard of Graham Phillips before the special military operation and Texas Russell Bentley?
Yeah, I definitely heard of Graham Phillips. I'm trying to remember whether I knew about Texas, about Russell Bentley. I might have. I can't remember whether or not, because I think some of my colleagues at the Gray Zone had him on before then. And I might have been aware of him through that, but I'm not totally positive. I can't really remember the timeline there.
Yeah.
But I did get a chance to meet up with Tex a couple times while I was in Donetsk, and he was a great time. He's a riot for sure. He's very, very opinionated man, and he won't hesitate to let you know it, which I appreciate. You know, it's good to deal with straight shooters.
Texas is a straight shooter. That's the term. Yeah. That's exactly the term I was looking for the other day when I talked to him. We'll leave a link somewhere above for a good talk with Texas. I actually lived at his place when I was there. Like
awesome.
He had me on his couch basically. So I got the full experience of no water in Donetsk, you know, and the struggle of the locals with that and everything else. The craziest thing for me was like how you get used to the human condition of getting used to everything is what's really bizarre about the whole experience. But like the artillery that's constant in the background, you know, Avdiivka and Makiivka in the background and like far away, it's like a thunderstorm somewhere, and it's just always there. And like you go to sleep and there's thunder in the background, no problem.
Right.
You know, it was bizarre. It was bizarre.
And you wake up in the morning, you know, just car alarms blaring a few blocks away. While I was there, I believe it's the regional administrative building was struck by a HIMARS attack. And so, you know, that woke me up one morning about 7:30. I felt the shake, and, you know, just immediately threw myself out of bed because when you're in that kind of sleepy space, it's like, oh no, flight or flight mode. I haven't been here long enough to know like that's safe. So I'm gonna just fly out of bed, check
Just
the
in
window.
case, yeah.
Yeah, right. You just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that, that was a normal experience, just waking up to artillery strikes, or to, in that case, a rocket strike, only a few blocks away. That was normal. And as you noted, the water situation, until they get back, like Slavyansk, really, the water situation is going to continue to be pretty difficult, because they're not in control of the dam that ultimately
feeds that whole area, yeah. The Russians are building a new pipeline. We discussed that, and apparently it'll be open soon. But we'll see how much that helps and if it'll be necessary, because the Russians are making gains in that area in the north. But before we get into the military side of stuff, I wanted to ask you, considering you're now working for Sputnik/RT, which is it two separate entities, by the way, or is it like kind of like one entity and you kind of like work for both?
No, they're separate entities. Although there's a lot of camaraderie there. And
Russian propaganda. How do you feel about the label of Russian propaganda and the fact that the West has like basically censored RT and Sputnik everywhere?
It's wild. I mean, it's especially wild in Europe, where you literally can't access my journalistic output. You cannot access my work without using a VPN. They say all this and that about authoritarian countries around the world, but here in sort of the heart of free speech and democracy, as it were, at least that's the idea. You can't access my work. I'm an American journalist, regardless of whether or not you like what I agree with. Like, I think that in and of itself really says something about where we've come, about how these kind of rights that were supposed to be guaranteed are now seen, as I've said before, like Ukrainian lives, and that they're ultimately kind of expendable in the name of, maintaining this political and economic control across the world. The rights can be granted, given away, destroyed. It's all kind of secondary, I think, at this point, to maintaining this dominance. Which is really sad, right? Finally, actually, I would say, though, I'm not sure how much this really means at this point yet, but I was pretty pleased to see that in the past couple of days, Twitter has started labeling NPR, National Public Radio in the United States, as U.S. state-affiliated media. They are correctly labeling one Western U.S. Government-backed outlet as it is. Obviously, this set off like a huge fits by the usual suspects. The liberals could not stand this for a second. They absolutely lost their minds that they would be treated like some Russian propagandist. It was a sight to behold. And really, if you're bored and a little or in a bad mood or something, I would encourage you to go look at the responses to this on social media. It'll perk you right back up. It's something else. But to me, I should say, because one of the major issues wasn't just that they were calling us state-affiliated media in a very obvious effort to delegitimize us or to kind of slander us as propagandists. It was first of all so obviously political in that it's oriented exclusively towards governments that are targeted by the United States, Russia, China, Serbia, even. But it's also it wasn't just that they were saying this about us; it's that they were overtly manipulating the algorithms to prevent our work from being seen. So they were actively censoring us while also actively encouraging the output of other people who were aligned with the deep state, with the narrative, the Western kind of consensus. So it's not just that they're belittling us, trying to delegitimize us. It's that they're actively handicapping us and preventing our work from spreading as it otherwise would. Because in the immediate aftermath of the special military operation, right, of Russian intervention in what had until that point been a civil war in Ukraine, in the immediate aftermath, the stuff that I would post was going viral. It was going really viral, right? Because there was such a vacuum and such a
When you
lack
say post,
of
you mean on
information
Twitter?
from the other side. Sorry?
You mean on Twitter when you say post?
On
or?
Twitter.
Yeah.
And just the month or so after that, it was like everything I posted would just blow up like crazy because people were desperate to see the other side. They were so, you know, really, it was so controlled what you were allowed to be exposed to that just to have any other perspective, it almost didn't even matter what it was. It was just, there's got to be another side to this, and people wanted to hear it. And so I think you had kind of a freak out in the so-called disinformation industry, right, which is just the U.S. government's own disinformation, right? That is what the so-called disinformation experts exist to do. It's basically to prop up the U.S. government's disinformation about other countries. They freaked out. You had, you know, you even had for a while the so-called Disinformation Governance Board. That has now
with that
morphed
crazy
into,
woman,
Nina Jankowicz, and it's really this bizarre kind of coterie of weird characters that are very strange. They're very off-putting. Like Nina, you know, she's like a theater chick that's like, you can tell her whole life she has been used to alienating people around her, and that's just like part of her personality. And then like externalizing that and making that their problem. That is kind of, you know, that's who, like the Michael McFalls, the Malcolm Nances. You find like these weird, very off-putting, aggressive kind of freaks and creeps.
Do you think they're demons? Do you think they're possessed?
Yeah, it almost seems that way, right?
Do you think we're living in the apocalypse? Do you think World War III has started?
They view themselves as like the last standing line of defense between authoritarianism and democracy, and you know, if Ukraine goes, it's this like continuation of the domino theory from 70 years ago. We're like, oh, if Ukraine falls, then all of Western Europe falls. It's the same stuff they were saying about Afghanistan, right? Oh, if you know, Afghanistan falls, well then they're gonna go straight through to the Gulf. And, you know, and they said this about Nicaragua. Oh, if Nicaragua falls, well, then, you know, Honduras is going to fall. Then Mexico is going to fall. Then we'll have communism right on the border.
But it's this. You're forgetting that Russia is unprovoked.
Like, right. Excuse me. Yeah, the unprovoked invasion. And that was something crazy, too. There was never such an insistence throughout all of the mainstream media on using that phrase. Like, I've never heard that. It's
not even just mainstream media. It's like your favorite YouTube history channel, your favorite YouTube like whatever channel, like you know, whether it's a boating channel or like whatever. They had to mention the unprovoked invasion, and I was just like, no. It's far from
it's a
unprovoked.
Phrase that was never applied to Iraq. It was never applied to Iraq, even though was a legitimately unprovoked invasion.
No, they had chemical weapons, man. They had chemical weapons.
On 9/11.
They had chemical weapons.
Everybody acknowledges that. There was no link between 9/11 and Saddam.
They had chemical weapons. Chemical weapons.
Because we gave them to them, we assumed they still had them, right? And no proof of that either. But to this day, you will never hear anybody in the New York Times, CNN, Fox News, I don't care what part of that mainstream spectrum, you will never hear anybody describe it as the unprovoked U.S. invasion of Iraq. Why? Because it's an obviously politically loaded term, and it doesn't benefit anybody in the ruling class to use it with regards to that conflict. And that's, you know, I think that's just one little microcosm of the entire attitude that's been taken towards this conflict that shows you the full extent to which the media in America, which used to have a somewhat adversarial role relationship, I should say, with the government. You can look back at the times that the Washington Post published the Pentagon Papers, and you can see that very clearly. Okay, there was a time when these people were willing to go to court and were willing to fight it out in court cases, willing at times to risk decades in jail for the ability to publish factual information, even though it's embarrassing to the U.S. government. That mentality is gone. It doesn't exist in the mainstream media anymore.
Do you think?
It's
Do you
like
think
a
that's?
unicorn.
Do you think that's?
What's that?
Do you think that's as a result of Operation Mockingbird and stuff like that, or do you think it's more of like the American general national psyche has just given up and they don't care?
Well, certainly Mockingbird was successful. Certainly it never ended.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said of kind of this collective psychological death of the belief in another world is possible. I think that kind of happened after the CIA assassinated Kennedy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just so blatant, it was so bold, it was so in your face.
Yeah.
We did this and there's nothing you can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
That I think, frankly, kind of a lot of people with brains did give up, and they said, like, how are we supposed to legitimately oppose this force if they can do anything they want and no one can stop them?
Okay.
I think that did lead to kind of the death of hope for a big segment of the American population, the death of the hope for real revolutionary change in the American system.
Considering,
it's hard to pinpoint how much of that is thanks to Operation Mockingbird, how much is it thanks to this kind of death of hope. But the effect is clear. It's that basically there almost is no space within American media for pushing back on this. I would say the one exception is kind of like Tucker Carlson's program on Fox News. He's the only
basically.
one. He's the only one who pushes back on the U.S.
on anything,
proxy
on
war
anything.
with Russia.
No, on any subject, basically, on any subject. He's the only one who consistently brings up any opposing narrative. Let's put it that way.
Right, exactly. But I should say his attitude with regards to China does seem to be broadly that there is a segment of the conservatives, and I think it's very clearly kind of manifests itself in people like Representative Matt Gaetz, who very overtly say that the reason that this proxy war with Russia is so disastrous is because it's interfering with what should be our efforts at a proxy war with China, right? That it's distracting from the real proxy war that we need to be fighting. And I don't know that I agree with them more. I will say that I do think it's slightly less dangerous because in the way that the United States ruling class has successfully fought a proxy war against Russia for a year or so, I don't say successful in the sense that they've won it, but they have successfully prosecuted this war. They continue to be fighting this open proxy war with Russia. I don't know that would happen with Taiwan. First of all, there's no land borders that you can jam weapons into it no way by which you can jam weapons into it over land. It's the kind of conflict that would very quickly devolve into a sort of Cuban Missile Crisis every time they needed to get them more munitions. It's also remains to be seen that, I mean, even under Trump, when they were waging this trade war with China, there was still kind of a recognition that like we can't do a full-on economic war with China because they make all of our stuff.
Yeah.
So
we learned that during the lockdowns, basically, that everything, including our graphics card and military chips, all come from China.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know that I don't know. In some senses, I do view them as a little bit less dangerous, just because I don't think that there is a widespread consensus among the U.S. ruling class in the same sense that there is towards Russia, that we can fight a proxy war with them and it'll be more or less okay. I don't think that consensus really exists around China. But, I certainly don't have firsthand knowledge of these people's motivations. I would certainly hope that, just as a rational kind of observer, that they wouldn't want to commit us to that course of events. But, who's really to say?
Considering we've gotten a little topical with the U.S. politics, I wanted to get your opinion, considering you're in the U.S. now, with this whole charade of Trump, or charade in U.S. speak, of Trump and the courts and, the witch hunt that hasn't ended. What do you have to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is pretty clearly a witch hunt. I mean, it's very obviously politically motivated. I mean, the idea that, and polling has kind of borne this out. It's a minority of Americans that have been polled support these charges against Trump. It's something like 45%. That may be a plurality, but it's a minority of Americans who believe that Trump should be prosecuted for this charge. It feels like they picked kind of the ticky-tackiest, most technical charge they could think up. Somehow that he, improperly made a hush money payment to some woman that he's accused of sleeping with. Look, if you're going to start prosecuting presidents for sleeping with women who aren't their wives, allegedly, like, that is a interesting road to go down. I don't think you're, really the first rock you pick up, I think you're going to find a little bit more than you bargained for.
And what do you have to say to people who say, like, pundits who say this is what the founding fathers envisioned with the checks and balances system?
I mean, I don't even know where to begin with that. Because, like, they tried to impeach him twice, right? It was it's so clear at this point. Like, they just wanted to get rid of him for any reason. Why? Not because he's actually a puppet of Putin, right? But because he kind of ripped the mask off the whole thing. He said, yeah, we're in Syria for the oil. Why else would we be there? He said, he's on an interview with Sean Hannity. And Hannity says, well, Putin's a killer. And Trump says, there's a lot of killers out there. You think we're so innocent? And that was the moment. It's like, that you're getting into dangerous territory. Not because you're overtly opposing U.S. foreign policy and, like, Latin America. Trump was a serious proponent of regime change, oversaw efforts at coups in Venezuela, Nicaragua, a successful one in Bolivia. But it was because he revealed the kind of transactionalism that has always underlied U.S. foreign policy, but which you're not allowed to mention in polite company. And he yanked the mask off that whole, this really kind of vile, the double standards. He gave us sort of an inside tour of the sausage factory. Said, here's how your sausage gets made. And the sausage factory managers didn't like that. They said, this is messing with our brand. This is something that is going to, because that was really, remember January 6th, the moment that it became clear that
no, what's January 6th? I never heard of it. Right?
The so-called coup, they accused Trump of the coup, of attempting to overthrow the democratically elected government of blah 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 in the United States, right? That to me, the moment that it became clear that this is not going to amount to anything at all was not when you had Trump come out and call for his supporters to be calm. It was not when you had the DC mayor say, we need to send in whoever, National Guard. The moment that you could tell nothing is going to happen was when all the top corporations in America, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, came out in a public statement, said, this needs to end. We are not supporting any transfer of power other than the peaceful democratic transition.
I
And they
had
did that
not
because
heard. I had not heard about a McDonald's statement before. That's
there was a
hilarious.
statement by all of the
That's
top
hilarious.
American companies, because it was messing with their brand, right? It was messing with their money. It was, to them, America is kind of this. It's more than just a flag, right? It's an ideal that we use and we sell in our products. McDonald's, when it goes and it's selling a little bit of America. Coca-Cola, when it goes, it's selling a little bit of America. And that is the way that's understood at that level of U.S. society. And so that was their ultimate objection to Trump, right? That he was messing with their money. It wasn't that he was racist or sexist. It wasn't that he said grab him by the pussy. It was that he was messing with their money. And this is really, that's what always underlies these things. Trump is kind of he's hard to put a label on him. He's a little bit of this kind of maverick figure where he represents new money in America. He doesn't represent old money in the same sense. And he's just, he's a little bit more coarse, and he understands the rules, but he doesn't understand that you're not supposed to say them out loud, right? And that is kind of the main threat that I always felt the powers that be in America felt from Trump.
To sum up Trump in the political situation in the U.S. now, do you think that there's a substantial chance of re-election of Trump in the coming election?
I think if there wasn't, then they wouldn't be putting all this energy into prosecuting him. That's what I saw since the January 6th thing, which was very, very exaggerated, which we now know was infiltrated by dozens of federal agents. To me, the whole point of that was basically to kneecap his 2024 run. The whole point was to sideline a bunch of people who would work for his campaign, to make them either unemployable or literally in jail and unable to work on his campaign. And now I think you see kind of the last move in that strategy, which is, well, if we can't get rid of him any other way, then let's take him to court and see if we can't throw him in jail.
I threw in a short question earlier, but you glossed over it because you thought I was joking. But considering this is a comedy channel, I'm serious. Do you think we're in World War III? It's a question that's, an ongoing question to all the guests. I want to get everybody's opinion on how close to World War III, or do you think the war has started, but it just hasn't been officially called World War III?
Well, it's an interesting question, I think, philosophically even.
Yeah.
What constitutes war? Was the Cold War World War III? Did it stop? Is it starting again?
Is it still going? Is this still World War II that's being finished off, considering they're fighting Nazis in Ukraine again?
Right. No, I mean, it's a legitimate question. And it's one, I mean, I guess my heart says yes, we're in World War III, whatever that means. Just in the sense that it does seem like these battle lines are being drawn or have already been drawn. That you have, Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, Syria on one side. You have the United States, Western Europe on the other. And in the middle, you have kind of a non-aligned movement, or a new iteration of a non-aligned movement that's looking out for their own national interests first and foremost. And, we are obviously, there's a proxy war being fought. It is the most significant proxy war, perhaps of all time. Certainly in modern history, that has led to the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives. We do see the United States government directly involved in a hot war with Russia. They are providing targeting information. They are giving intelligence, reconnaissance information to a regime in Kiev, which is using that information to carry out terrorist attacks in some cases. So, you know, I don't know how else we could say it is a war, right? It is a war. What constitutes World War III? Are you somebody who says it's not World War III until the nukes are falling around us? I think that's kind of the main determining factor. If you're somebody who thinks it's not World War III until it's a nuclear holocaust has started, then, you know, I guess not.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's the you know, the beginning stages, 1942, 1943 type of thing. I got a very heavy topic for the next question, which is the killing of Maxim Fomin in St. Petersburg. That happened within the last week of when this will be uploaded. That's the second journalist, or let's say civilian, who was killed in a targeted assassination by presumably or provably the Ukrainian side, the first being Daria Dugina. What is your take on this tactic or strategy, or how do you feel about this event?
Yeah, so I think basically this is going to be probably the new model that we're going to have to deal with in terms of quote unquote Ukrainian resistance. I think this is kind of the new phase that the Kiev regime and its Western backers have decided is going to be their way of striking back. They have not been able to mount a successful counteroffensive on the battlefield. I think their tactics are going to switch more or less to terrorism now, where they decide we're not going to be able to achieve victory going head to head with Russian forces or Russian aligned forces. Instead, what we're going to have to do is try to demoralize the Russian nation, to create this kind of widespread sense of instability, insecurity, and to destroy the Russian nation from within.
And you've been to Russia because you've been to Donetsk, so you must have been to Russia. On the way there, you know, how do you feel about the Russian psyche and how that will affect? You know, do you think the average Russian is going to finally realize that evil Putler needs to be overthrown by the oligarchs? And I see you laughing. So, do you think that this kind of psychological warfare might actually backfire against the Ukrainians?
I certainly imagine so. I mean, I spoke on RT about this the other day, and to me, especially when we're talking about this particular journalist, Vladlen Tatarsky, Maxim, he's not a traditional journalist. I don't think he's somebody who really like went to journalism school and kind of rose through the ranks. He's more of a guy who comes at it from the perspective of, hey, I was on the front lines. I was defending my people, and I want to get the truth out there about what we're doing there. So I think even more so than kind of a traditional journalist figure, this is somebody who you cut him down and 10 or 100 more Vladlens will appear, because this was a guy who came at this from the perspective of I'm just a patriotic Russian and I'm trying to defend my people and our beliefs and you know, our sovereignty and territorial integrity. You know, my suspicion is that if this is meant to intimidate Russian people into silence, then it will backfire. And really, you know, it kind of reveals a level of desperation to me that they have to rely on just terror tactics. It shows you, I mean, first of all, looking back at the death of Daria Dugina, looking back at the explosion on the Kerch Bridge, the Crimean Bridge, looking back on even the BS cover story that the West embraced in an effort to distance the CIA from the Nord Stream bombings and the Biden administration.
The Ukrainian aligned group,
Right.
that
The
did
so-called Ukrainian aligned group. Right.
the expert military diving operation from a sailboat.
Well, it tells you that even amongst the liberal mainstream media machine, there is this tacit acceptance of the fact that the Ukrainians have embraced terror tactics. And right now, I think they're trying to put it on, what is it they call the Free Russian Army or whatever.
Didn't hear that narrative, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, well, you know, they want to pin it on this supposed Russian, you know, revolutionaries that
the separatists, like
Nazis, right?
anti-Russian, yeah, basically.
Yeah, and they want to kind of create this perception, even though we know it's BS, right? There is no widespread anti-Putin, you know, violent movement in Russia. It simply doesn't exist. And even like the Western kind of intelligence analysts, I even heard a Bellingcat guy admit this a couple of days ago, says that does not exist, right? There is no widespread, you know, movement against Putin in Russia. That doesn't exist. Even they admit it. So what this is instead is it's an effort to create a plausible, the same way they did with the Ukrainian militants around the Nord Stream attack. They want to create this kind of plausible deniability where it's not actually the Ukrainian regime, it's some Russian-led formation that is extremely closely tied to the Ukrainian regime, but somehow has complete autonomy and independence, and operates from Ukrainian territory, right? Like, it's nonsense. It's laughable on the face, but if you don't really know what's going on, you could, you
easily believe it.
You could be forgiven for, you know, believing this kind of stuff. But so to me, that it kind of represents like this is going to be the new phase of the proxy war, where you know they're going to try to create instability within Russia. The economic war failed, right? The sanctions, the effort to turn the Russian ruble into rubble, as Joe Biden said last March, that has failed spectacularly. It's boomeranged and even bitten, I should say, the Western powers in the butt pretty hard in big segments of Europe, where they're still dealing with double-digit inflation. Lots of people, you know, you're seeing kind of, I think, Bulgaria, Hungary, even Poland now rising discontent with this basically being made to play second fiddle in your own country to a bunch of Ukrainians, many of whom celebrate your grandfather's deaths, right? So
it's very eloquently put.
Yeah.
And politically correct. It shows you're a journalist. What was I gonna say? One of the things that I had lined up here to talk about, and you kind of touched upon it now, is the world of multipolarity. A world of multipolarity that is emerging from this whole sanctioning Russia, and Russia having to find back alleys for all kinds of transactions, from oil to financial to everything else. What is your take on the spectacular failure of the U.S. to isolate Russia?
Well, it shows you exactly what the specific limitations of American sanctions are. They succeeded in many ways at taking down a country like Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, while they may not have...
Iraq.
Right. Well, in Yugoslavia, they did succeed in the sense that, you know, you did have full Balkanization. You did have a regime change that succeeded. They haven't succeeded in the sense of overthrowing the governments of, let's say, Syria, Venezuela, Iran, but they have succeeded in, to a great extent, absolutely obliterating the economy and making living normal people's lives a living hell. They have succeeded at that in Cuba. You know, I just came back from Cuba last week, and it's a very tough situation. The sanctions have been extremely effective at just making normal people's lives very difficult, at cutting down rations, at making it impossible for the Cubans to export sugar. There really has been a serious sabotage of the economies of these smaller nations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nations that really we can describe Iran certainly as a regional power,
Yeah.
but the other ones wouldn't even really fit in the bill. It's at least not at this point. Um, but going up against a superpower, or something close, going up
Mm-hmm.
against Russia, which has all this tremendous mineral wealth, which is really, you hear the phrase "too big to fail" thrown around around SVB or whatever banks the West is plopping up this week to prevent the banking system from collapsing.
Mm-hmm.
But Russia really is too big to fail, and the rest of the world
That's a
knows
very,
that.
very interesting way to look at it. I've never made the parallel, but yeah, but Russia is too big to fail, basically.
And that's what you saw the decision being made from countries that were until very recently firmly within the U.S. orbit, countries like
Mm-hmm.
India and Brazil, uh, both of which decided very loudly and very clearly, we are not going to sabotage our economies just because you tell us to. And that's a powerful message that carries reverberations for all countries that are kind of sick of being treated as U.S. vassals. Number one on the list is surely got to be Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
which is now not only normalizing relations with its longtime regional rival Iran, but it's also decided that it's going to do business with China in yuan. We just saw this huge cut from OPEC and Russia just a few days ago that caused oil prices to jump $5-10 a barrel. This, it's all happening at such a rapid rate that it's honestly hard to pinpoint one specific aspect of this that's uniquely important, because it's all important. All of these countries basically seeing the writing is on the wall, and it's time to transition away from a dollarized economy.
Mm-hmm.
It reflects a new understanding that just 5 years ago it sounded kind of like fantasy when you said
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Just that the rest of the world's just kind of going to go with China, and the dollar is going to sort of collapse.
Fantasy or a suicide wish, like Gaddafi, basically. You know.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Um.
And now it's clear that we've reached kind of a critical mass where there is such discontent in the rest of the world with being treated as kind of second-class citizens by the Western ruling class. There is
Mm-hmm.
such an opening in terms of the U.S. elites overplaying their hands with sanctions, going too far, freezing the reserves of Russia. Right, that belongs to the people of Russia. Freezing the reserves of Afghanistan, that belongs to Afghan people.
They left them
Um,
helicopters, at least. The Afghanis at least got helicopters.
they got a little something for their billions of dollars in money that was stolen from them. And then they say, oh, magnanimously, they come out, oh, well, actually, we'll, you know what, we've seen the light, and we're willing to let you have a portion of your money over time, as long as it's dispersed through a body that we choose, and we get to decide what it goes to.
And we take a
And
cut
people
off the top.
realize, right.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be the Taliban, and you don't have to align with the Taliban's politics to
Mm-hmm.
understand that this can be weaponized against you in the future if
Mm-hmm.
make some kind of move they don't like militarily. If you try to leave NATO, if you try to kick out American forces, try to get the bases gone, or even if you push back on kind of the social or culture war kind of thrust from the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them now, I'll meet people who've worked at U.S. embassies in Latin America, and it's like they're all kind of telling me about like the gender and sex education programs that they work on, and like that's really kind of the main focus of a lot of the embassy activity from the United States in not just Latin America, but in a huge swath of the developing world. And it's not that popular. It really isn't. And so, you know, you can definitely see down the road the way that
Oh, okay.
rights has
Oh,
been.
okay, you're back. All
Yeah,
right.
sorry, I got a phone call and it
No,
somehow.
it's all right. It's all right.
So yeah, the way that LGBTQ rights has been kind of
Hmm.
weaponized
Don't
by
forget the plus. Don't forget the plus. That's where
by
it's really at.
Soros backed groups, by Open Societies Foundation, by the United States government. It's kind of, you can see there's this uh, new fault line that they're pursuing
Hmm.
within more culturally conservative societies, where they'll be able to have a straight shot, you know, direct contact, an almost direct oversight over one faction, the more metropolitan, kind of liberal, urban-leaning, sexually diverse segment. You know, you can see right now, oh, this is where the foreign aid is going in the United States. It's going to kind of create and prop up this segment of society so that we can weaponize them in the future and use them to turn a society against itself.
Yeah.
All of this very, very clearly um, being politicized, right? And it's, to me, I don't have anything against gay people in Latin America, or trans people, or whatever you want to be, right?
Hmm.
But what I do have a problem with is the weaponization of people by their identity in an overt effort to cause regime change and to institute a US backed candidate.
and
That's, no
and
matter
and
how you
and the
dress it up.
propagation of this kind of propaganda to like children, that's unacceptable. But yeah, also the regime change is bad, but the children thing
Well,
is,
it's all part of the same point, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah,
all,
yeah, yeah.
you're sending this to kids in an effort to kind of create the
Future.
segment of society that tomorrow
Hmm.
you can weaponize against
Hmm.
their culture,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that seems to be kind of the new understanding of the U.S. foreign policy elite for how we're going to continue to dictate the affairs of other countries in the future. Because now, you know, first, for a long time it was militarily. We can just dominate them directly into doing what we say or want. Then it was economically, right? We'll
Hmm.
bully them through access to the dollars. Now it's cultural, right? We're going to bully them uh, through the propaganda machine, and through the fact that we still control the propaganda that
Hmm.
a great percentage of the world consumes. And it's gonna, you know, it's cultural. It's gonna be through movies and music, and that I think is kind of the next phase of how this machine is gonna manufacture consent going forward
You
for
say
U.S. domination.
You say machine, and that perfectly lets me segue into the last question that we have going here. We're into the 57th minute of this talk. Thank you, everybody who's still sticking around for this talk with Wyatt Reed. It has been interesting, but the last subject that I wanted to cover was the recent protest that, well, relatively recent protest that took place in Washington, I believe. The Rage Against the War Machine, it was called. You were there. I'm going to play some video of you in the background giving your speech. Tell us your impression of the event and what happened.
Yeah, so this was a rally that took place in February, and I was very honored to have the opportunity to speak and really bring a message from the people of the Donbass to audiences in the United States, in Washington, D.C. That was in front of the Lincoln Memorial, obviously a kind of iconic location for rallies in the United States. It's the site of the famous "I Have a Dream" speech by Martin Luther King Jr. and a deeply symbolic historic location. And I was able to describe, firsthand my experiences in the Donbass, and kind of tie that back to the way the war machine impacts us in the United States here at home. Because here where I live in Southwest Virginia, I am about 15 miles from the Radford Arsenal, which produces all of the accelerants and propellants that are used in American manufactured artillery and rockets. Basically, all manufactured in this one specific arsenal here. And it's incredibly dangerous. And this is what I described in my speech, is that not only has my dad lost friends to explosions that are mysterious explosions that are never really make the news or explained if they do, but they also have massive health consequences for those of us who live around here, especially those who live directly downstream. Because once a month, for many years, decades even, the arsenal authorities simply conduct open burns of the remains of this process of producing these artillery shells, these accelerants and propellants. And that runoff is piped directly into the New River, which is the source of water for all of the communities around here practically. It's something that means that, not only do my friends and I have stories from when we're Boy Scouts and kids, and we're fishing in this river and we're pulling out fish that have tumors bigger than their heads. It also leads to people who are my age, right? A woman I know personally is still in her 20s who had thyroid cancer, had to get surgery because of the water, because of the contamination, all the carcinogens that are just piped directly into our water around here so that we can prop up this war machine in other countries. And so I kind of, with my speech, I tried to tie together the death and destruction that's caused in our own communities and the death and destruction that I saw firsthand in Donetsk, in Lugansk, in the Donbass, because it's all coming from the same place. It's all coming from the same people. It's all coming from this same desire to subjugate the rest of the world, to do anything that it's seen as necessary to maintain this total control over the world's people and its resources. And the consequences are devastating, but they are sadly predictable. What we're doing here to our people at home is the same in slow motion as what we're doing to all of those we're targeting for regime change across the world.
Yeah, you do. I watched the speech before we connected today, and you did a really good job of connecting the circle, so to say, of like you just outlined now, how the weapons kill on both sides, basically even before they're fired.
Yeah.
I have to ask you, because you were actually there. Many commentators have said that this event was a quote-unquote failure. Because of the low turnout, and it was not as great as it could have been. What's your take on those people who say it was a failure? Do you think it was a failure? Do you think it could have been better? Do you think it was good, considering how many people are lazy and fear COVID and are online keyboard warriors? What's your take?
Well, frankly, I was surprised that as many people showed up as they did. I heard people trying to kind of downplay the numbers. To me, it was several thousand people that came out, and that's arguably one of the biggest anti-war demonstrations since the Iraq War. So to me, I think a lot of the people who are saying that were either NAFO trolls that wanted to kind of downplay the success of the event, or they were politically motivated, like liberal leftists who were upset that this event was taking place at all because they view themselves as kind of the end all be all of the anti-war movement and was happening outside of their control, and they didn't like that. So that's kind of who I've heard those criticisms coming from. People obviously with an axe to grind, and very clear motives to misrepresent the event and to slander and tarnish it. I kind of, to me, I tried to ignore those people. Largely, that to me, they're kind of a distraction. They're not people with much of an audience. They're not people who are taken very seriously within the United States, I don't think. So I kind of took it as a sign that what we were doing was having an impact, right? So, you know, to me, the fact that we got anti-war legendary members of Congress like Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul, and, you know, Tulsi Gabbard, who says some wild things from time to time about the role of the U.S. military, especially in terms of AFRICOM, but has been excellent on the proxy war against Russia. For me, getting all these people on one stage and saying, you know, enough is enough. It's time to stop pumping all this money into endless war. To me, that was a huge success. Just showing that, you know, independent of the political labels, that there is a big appetite, even among people who are fairly respectable politicians. You know, Tulsi Gabbard is not some crazy lunatic who you can dismiss as just being, you know, some weirdo on the internet. To me, the fact that we were able to get so many widely respected speakers together on the same space, speakers who disagree very strongly about
some subjects,
about a number of subjects unrelated to the war machine, but who otherwise all wanted an end to this proxy war with Russia. To me, the fact that we were all able to get up on stage, march to the White House, and get along, you know, that to me was a huge victory in and of itself for whatever movement is to come in the U.S. Whatever movement that we're going to see that's going to be able to forcefully demand an end to this, as opposed to just beg for it. It's going to start there to me, and I'm excited to see where it goes. And I hope that those who seek to smother that, whether it be for their own political purposes or whether it be because they are partisans of the Ukrainian regime, I would like to see them proved wrong. And I hope that in the coming months and years, we will do exactly that.
I got to ask you, considering you're an American, are you pro-gun?
Pro-gun.
Pro-gun.
I am somebody who I have kind of conflicting feelings on this. I've been affected in a way that a lot of Americans haven't by gun violence. And, you know, even in my hometown where I am now, which is Blacksburg, Virginia, there was one of the most infamous mass shootings in the country's history, claimed 32 lives over a decade ago, and including one of my coaches and a woman who worked with the same kind of children's
You need a permit? Do you need a permit to carry in Virginia?
You need a permit to open carry a pistol. Yeah. So,
and concealed carry?
It's not that
also
hard to
permit.
Get.
Also permit for concealed carry.
Yes. Yeah. Believe that's the case.
All right.
But you know, that wasn't really I don't think a
deciding factor.
Kind of, factor in that particular shooting at Virginia Tech. But regardless, my point is basically, you know, I'm somebody who has My coach was killed in that.
Oh,
Someone I've worked
condolences.
with pretty fairly closely at a camp for kids was killed as well. I do think that there is kind of something a little bit crazy about the number of guns that we have in this country. But I'm also I like shooting guns. I like the fact that we are able to have them.
Yeah.
My personal feelings on this are not super strong one way or the other, but I'm somebody who kind of feels there are compelling arguments on both sides. It's just not really my main issue, because I don't really. I'm not at a point in my life where I feel like there is some revolution brewing among the American working class right now that we all need to be armed to the gills for. I'm not really of the opinion that they're like trying to take away our guns because they think there's going to be some revolution in the near future. Maybe down the line, maybe 30 years or something, who knows. But I'm somebody who kind of sees that process, if that's going to happen in this country, is a little bit divorced from the gun control question.
Yeah.
We'll see. It's not my main issue. I try to focus more on what we do abroad. But
No, I just wanted to throw it out. I just wanted to throw it out to get an American's take, because it's always interesting for us non-Americans to hear about that aspect of societal debate in the U.S.
Yeah.
Wyatt, thank you for stopping by. It's been excellent. Is there anything that you want to say to the subscribers and viewers before we round this off?
Yeah, check out my social media feeds if you're interested in following along with my work. You can check me out on Twitter
Links.
at Wyatt Reed 13. You can check me out on Telegram. Type in Wyatt Reed. I'm on Substack. Type in Wyatt Reed. And been working on a new page, new show coming out called Decentral Intelligence. You can check that out on Twitter as well. And that's pretty much what I've got going for now. But I'll definitely let you know if anything new comes on the horizon.
Excellent. We'll leave links in the description to all of those places. Again, Wyatt, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an excellent talk. We discussed a lot of interesting topics. Let's get some music going here. There we go. Everybody who stuck around to the end, thank you. Have a good one. See you later.